afternoon, Howard Wiig, Code Green, ThinkTech Hawaii. Welcome, one and all. We all know that stargazing is a great experience, which we experience too not frequently enough. We're going to learn about why it's such a healthy experience and how we can achieve the stargazing we once knew when we were children. Back in a second. Good afternoon, Howard Wiig again. It was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. I was taking my fiance on a tour of the Big Island, and one night we were right up top of Saddle Road, that's 4,000 or 5,000 feet up, and miles and miles away from the nearest light source. And suddenly she said, "Pull the car over and stop." And she's not like that at all. She's generally a very subdued person. And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll do this." And then she said, "Get out." And I said, "It's cold up here." And she said, "Get out." And I did. And she said, "Look up." And there were stars and stars and stars, millions of stars. And it just hit me like it was the most beautiful arias in the world being sung down at me, cascading over me. And I started to cry. It was so beautiful. And I thanked her very much. We don't get to see stars like that in our day. Why? Because of light pollution. So let's go to the first slide, please. We, as a species, human beings, might be the most light sensitive of all the species in the world. And this has been evolving in us for 600 million years, when our distant ancestors, single-cell organisms, began to be dependent on sunlight as they were floating around in the ocean. And about 500 million years ago, they got more sensitive, and our ancestors developed this rhythm, this light, dark rhythm on which their life depended. And then came along Thomas Edison with his incandescent light, and things have never been the same. And we call that the light going up, light pollution, and it has been increasing every year. So it's time we dialed back a few million years to re-achieve the light-dark homeostasis. Next slide, please. So the primates, our monkey ancestors, when they evolved after the meteor hit, and remember that about 66 million years ago, the dinosaurs were wiped out, and that there's always a good side to everything. The good side was that with the dinosaurs gone, our primate ancestors, our monkey ancestors, were able to fill the niche somewhat and began to evolve. And after a while, those puny little monkeys up in the trees became gorillas, chimpanzees, and so forth. And with each successive evolution, their eyes came closer and closer and closer together. Remember, like a crocodile, a vertebrate, has eyes way off to the side of its head. No, we got closer and closer, and we developed what's called binocular vision. What in the world is that? It's where our two eyes are looking essentially at the same thing, and they give us our depth perception. We've all had experiences where we're just looking at something with one eye, and we don't know if it's far away or near, or what one object is in relation to the other. So we are very unique as a species in having 80% of all the world's information come at us through our eyes. And we all have dogs and cats, hopefully. And you'll notice how much more sensitive their smell is than ours. That's because they evolved more with very good sniffers, whereas our sniffers are very poor, but our vision, in contrast, is very excellent. And that made the light dark circadian rhythm, daily rhythm of light and dark, much more important to us. Next slide, please. Circadian rhythm is not just something that happens, it was something that evolved in to give us order in life. And the importance of order, best analogy I could think of was growing up in a chaotic household. Say both parents are drug addicts and there's criminals walking in and out of the house at all hours of day and night. And sometimes kids get to school, sometimes they don't. That is no way to raise a child to be productive and happy in life. Whereas most of us, I hope, grew up in the proverbial parents get us up in the morning, feed us breakfast, get us to school, school feeds us lunch, we go home, we play, we have dinner, we go to bed. There's the daily rhythm to that. And that is the type of rhythm that our ancestors developed with relation to sunlight and moonlight. And that was very, very basic to our survival as a species. Next slide, please. As I said, this has been going on for 600 million years. And I mentioned that the great meteor struck where the Yucatan is now, and the earth literally was shrouded in darkness, and the dinosaurs and all of their cousins and relatives were totally wiped out. And that is what allowed our primate ancestors to evolve. Next slide, please. And here comes melatonin. You know, we think, or at least us males maybe think that testosterone is the most important hormone. We have melatonin is more important because our very survival depends on it. In the middle of a sunny day, such as we're having today, melatonin is suppressed. It is virtually non-existent. And so we're up and lively and we're hopping around and being productive and alert. And then as the sun begins to set and things gradually get darker, the melatonin starts to rise in our systems and we get sleepier and sleepier, and boom, we can't help it, we go to sleep. And then that is the normal cycle that we've experienced for going way back 600 million years. And naturally, light pollution has disrupted that sacred cycle. Next slide, please. So here comes us. We are descended from genus Homo, and those are the great ape-like creatures that got off of or out of the trees and started walking around. We became bipedal. Our main method of locomotion was standing upright and putting one foot in front of the other. Now, this had a great effect on our vision and our visual sensitivity, because with the binocular vision, we were actually, you know what? I described ourselves as great apes. Nothing great about our genus Homo ancestors. They were only about 3 feet tall, puny little things. I don't think they even weighed 100 pounds. And imagine saber-toothed tigers and Lord knows what else prowling all over the place. This is in the savannah of Africa. That's where all of us came from. How did we survive? One, by our great vision. And number two, because we had this diurnal cycle where we knew that we were going to go to sleep. We knew we were going to wake up. And that gave us order to life and definitely increased our chances for survival. So we hung around in the African savannah for about almost 7 million years. The first primates, or first Homo genus, came to existence about 7 million years ago, and we didn't move out of Africa until around 60,000, 90,000 years ago. So we are actually children of Africa, and our visual system developed thanks to what we evolved with in the savannah. of Africa. Next slide, please. I mentioned melatonin before. Here comes Thomas Edison. He gets our melatonin cycle, our circadian rhythm cycle, all messed up. And we'll see in the next slide that it is definitely harmful to health. And especially harmful is the blue light that we get exposed to. You'll remember that our visual, the frame of our visual, human visuality goes from violet on one side to red on the other. And the closer to violet or blue you get, the shorter the wavelength. And the shorter the wavelength, the more active it is. I think of blue light as being the Mexican jumping beans of the visible light spectrum, and they go bouncing all over the place, and they stimulate us, suppress the melatonin, and really disrupt not only our sleep cycle, but a lot of that blue light goes bouncing up into the atmosphere, and that's a main cause of light pollution and our inability to see the stars and our inability to go smoothly in that circadian cycle. Next slide, please. So what does suppressed sleep do? The blue light, it really interferes with our ability to sleep and causes fatigue, headaches, stress, anxiety. Our rhythm that we've evolved with for so many years gets really, really messed up. And a lot of us, I know, have experienced exactly that thing. Next slide, please. There's one person I've met in the whole lighting world named Mark Baker, and he has his own organization called Soft Light LLC. And he deals with people who become his patients who say that LED lights and all the blue in those LED lights definitely affect their health. And here's a couple of quotes from his patients. LED-triggered seizures have left me with broken teeth, bruises, and excruciating pain. And every day at work, these unnatural lights terrorize me. Now, Mark is a little on the extreme side for being anti-blue light and anti-LED, anti-fluorescent. But that just gives you a clue as to the harm that might be done with artificial lighting. Let me go off into LEDs now. When a lot of us were growing up, we still grew up with the incandescent light. The Latin word for white hot heat is incandescere. And what Thomas Edison did was just pump a whole lot of radiant energy through tiny little filaments, and it caused the filaments to glow much like the sun glows. So the light given out by the incandescence has the virtue of being much closer to sunlight and moonlight than our new, first the fluorescence and now the LED lights are. And next slide, please. So as a result, however, of going from incandescent to fluorescent to LEDs, lighting has become much, much, much more efficient. However, in outdoor lighting, a good solid, think street lights and advertising lights and so forth, a good solid 30% of all the light emanated goes up either sideways where it doesn't do any good or causes glare, or it goes up into the heavens, and that's the real source of light pollution. 326 million streetlights alone worldwide. Oh, and they account for as much energy as is used by 31 million cars over a whole year. That's a whole lot of wasted energy. Next slide, please. And here's an example of poor lighting versus good lighting. The bad lighting is on the right, where a lot of the light, as I said, goes sideways or up into the heavens. Why not direct that light down to where you need it, to your sidewalks and your streets? And also, in so doing, you're reducing glare, and all of us in driving at night have experienced the discomfort and the danger of glare at night. So you're making the environment safer, and you're saving a whole lot of energy because you're not wasting all that energy that's going into places where you don't want it. Next slide, please. And so I get back to my original description of that night on the Big Island up on top of Settle Road. And again, it's one of life's peak experiences. I'll take it to the grave with me. It was so beautiful. And I hope that all of us can work to reduce light pollution, get it down where it's needed, so we can see more and more stars. And maybe you too, one day, will look up and see jillions of stars and have that experience of feeling that the most beautiful arias in the world were coming down at you. But let's talk a little more. We don't need any more slides about LEDs. We measure lighting efficiency. Light emitting diodes is what LEDs stand for. And they have been taking the lighting world like gangbusters. And so we start, again, with Thomas Edison and the incandescent light that I described. And about 1939, at the New York World Fair, the first fluorescent lights appeared. And we measure lighting efficiency in lumens per watt, and the incandescent got about 15 lumens per watt. And the first fluorescents way back when got about 45 lumens per watt. So they were 3 times as efficient. So you could get as 3 times as much light per watt down on the floor or wherever you needed it. And fluorescence improved and improved and improved over the years, so that maybe 10, 12 years ago, they got up around 100, up to 120 lumens per watt. Very, 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 very efficient. But, and just as they were achieving that, along came LEDs, and the designers, the engineers, saw the great potential of LEDs and worked to improve, so that your common household light now, it looks just like an incandescent, it's called an A light, has a minimum efficiency of about 85 lumens per watt. Compare that with the old incandescent 15 lumens per watt. And another virtue of the LEDs is the wattage is so low that they give off virtually zero heat. I know all of us have had the experience of touching an incandescent lamp and untouching it really, really quickly, because it gets up to over 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Put a cloth over an incandescent light and it will light on fire. Or if you were a Girl Scout and you had your little Girl Scout oven, the source of heat for that oven was an incandescent lamp. So touch an LED that's been on for hours and it's just barely warm. In our typical Hawaii household, we need more heat or less heat. Less, of course. So it has the double advantage, in addition to saving us a heck of a lot of energy, of producing virtually no heat for us. So again, the LEDs continue to improve. They're going to be taking over like gangbusters. In fact, the majority of lamps sold already are LEDs, and they're going to improve. And oh, here's another thing. Each light has a color, and we know, say, warm lights versus cool lights, and they're measured in degrees Kelvin. You can dial up, or the lighting manufacturer can, any light from about 2000 degrees Kelvin, which is amber, all the way to 10,000 degrees Kelvin, which is an intense blue light that you certainly don't want in your house or even in your workplace. It's made for very special applications. And a really nice light for our homes where we want a relaxing atmosphere is about 2,700 degrees Kelvin. And in our offices, where you want a more stimulating atmosphere, so we get all productive in our work, that's about 3,500 or 4,000 degrees Kelvin. Now, another virtue of LEDs, I mentioned they can go down to about 2,000 degrees Kelvin. That is where animals such as turtles and birds cannot see that amber light because they have much, much, much different visual spectra than we do. And what's the importance of that? Well, we all know about the turtle hatchlings on the North Shore that are causing all kinds of traffic problems. When the mother turtle goes up to the beach to hatch or lay the eggs, and when they hatch, the first thing the little baby turtles do is look for light, because if there's moonlight out, the moonlight is radiating on the ocean, and that instinctually is where they go to, because they've got to get from the beach into the ocean before some predators get to them. And so what's happened with artificial lights that are around these beach areas for the turtles is they get attracted instead to the artificial lights instead of the ocean, and bad things happen. They head for roads, they get run over by roads, or they get all confused and they cluster together under the wrong light and they simply die. So what we're doing in beach areas, and Florida has been leading the world in this, is lighting, say, parking lots that are right next to beaches with LEDs that are just 2,000 degrees Kelvin. They're amber, and the light is good enough so that we can see what we're doing when we go into those parking lots, but the turtles cannot see them. And therefore, we are helping wildlife to thrive. And ditto applies to a lot of our birds. On the island of Kauai, especially, we have the Luzon albatross, and they nest in the cliffs of northern Kauai. And when those little fledglings, those baby birds that are just beginning to flap their wings and explore, they too are looking for light, moonlight reflected off of the ocean, and that directs them. However, they get misdirected on land to streetlights, and they think it's where they need to be, and they circle around and around and around the lights, all confused, and they get exhausted and they drop, and they either get run over by cars or a dog or a cat or some other predator will get them. So we've had on the North Shore of Kauai, just too many bird albatross deaths to even think about it. It's quite thoroughgoing tragedy. So LEDs can dial you back to 2,000 degrees Kelvin, or let's say you are lighting a sports arena, a stadium, especially say a football stadium. Number one, you can make the LEDs really, really powerful. So you get all the foot candles, the illumination that you want down on the field, but you don't want to have all that light up in the stands. You can direct LED lights very, very precisely. You can carve a real nice patch into just on the playing field, and then the spectators will not have any glare, and they're in more subdued light. You need a certain amount of light, but just enough to get around. And so that's another virtue, and you're doing this very, very, very energy efficiently. And in so directing that light, again, if it's in the vicinity of any birds, boom, you don't affect the bird life nearly as much. So that's another great thing that's coming down with lighting. Another virtue is There is so much energy to be saved worldwide in all kinds of applications. One of the best energy savings we had in Hawaii, and this is years ago when the LEDs were just emerging, is a business that caters to the airlines, including to the airline tarmac. They took out those guiding lights that guide airplanes into certain runways. They removed 40-watt incandescent lamps and replaced them with 3-watt LEDs, and they made it blue. Remember, blue is that most active color. And the pilots report that with those little 3-watt blue guiding lights, they can see better than they could with the old 40-watt incandescents. Multiply that by hundreds of airports worldwide, and you have tremendous energy savings. And another thing you can do with LEDs is color tune them any way you want. And this has become so inexpensive that any homeowner who wants to, say, have a party and change moods at that party, you start out all stimulated, and then you want to have a dance, or you want to have a fancy game or whatever. You, just as a homeowner, you can dial any light color you want, and it'll remain very energy efficient, and you can have just the party of your life just right there. It's tremendous. Oh, and did I get to horticulture? There's certain crops that maybe shall remain unnamed, but they used to be grown under cover of darkness. There was no seeing them, but the LEDs now can take any color that you want and be put into a greenhouse and grow the holy heck out of those. They're beginning to fine tune that this color is best for cannabis, this for lettuce, this for asparagus, and so forth. So we're beginning to increase the productivity of greenhouses tremendously. And I see where I am about to be yanked off the stage. So I thank you very much, and I hope you have become a great fan of dark skies so you can see the stars and have a heavenly experience and get more and more efficient and specialized as you and all of us convert to LEDs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.